join. Got a lot of folks out there. Hey, Steve. Super Steve over there. All right. Cool. Thank you all for joining. What we're going to talk about today is setting up checklists in SAM. And for some people, this might be a recap, but I want to save some time for questions. Questions, if you have any of things that are going on for you. Let me make sure this is going forward. So today what we're going to cover are how checklists are being used out for some clients who've already established checklists out there and have them either live or in preparation for being live. And then we'll talk about actually how to set up a checklist item. So some of the things that you need to prepare for, but also just how to go through the steps and what SAM is prompting you for. We will talk about the preparation, and then hopefully we'll have some time for your questions as you guys are putting checklists together or getting ready to go live with some of these. So today, checklists are really being used a lot for the licensing and home study process. They might, and that is the process really, it could be just for your team internally, but I think, let me do this for a second. I think that what I want to do really quick is take a pause and see if I can mute people. Okay. All right. So let me get back over here. So what I think is that licensing and home study process is best utilized through checklists when that process is actually shared with families and clients that you're working with, so that your team is gifted, frankly, with a lot of time back from kind of the fiddling of either driving documentation out to families' homes or messing with their email and correspondence and emails sort of trickling in to collect these documentations. I think it also empowers the family to support you and know what's going on in that. So I think the communication is increased when it's a shared process that's available for your clients. People are using this for adoption documentation. So once the match is made, what are the documents that need to be collected? And that's adoption or really at placement for a foster care placement. So documentation that the family is required to complete then at that point as well. Some of our agencies are using checklists to present really lengthy forms like narratives, autobiographies, and I'll show you one agency's way of setting that up. Agencies might use these checklists for their team and volunteer requirements, and also for background check collection. So the documentation that's necessary to be distributed to your families, and then for the families, once they've completed fingerprints, to let you know once they've completed authorization forms to upload that to you so that you can go and take that off to the states. So there's lots of different ways. Agencies are using the checklist should be available for to be shared publicly for all entity types. If you notice that that's not available, you just let me know through support that that's not there, but it should be available for everybody, as well as logins for the end user. End users I'm going to describe as the people outside of your organization that are accessing the public forms or the checklists, okay? Okay, so let me jump in. What I want to do is show you some of the checklists. So this is our master site and an example of a checklist. So checklists, you have so much ability to change the styling and the options that are displayed. Kind of by default, your checklist will look like this. It'll probably have your own styling, your agency's colors and things to it. But I think the purpose here is to, one, provide some message of why the families are here and how what they're doing, what their actions need to be at this moment. And then Each section of the checklist should really be broken down into simple steps or requirements that take the family from part A to part B to part C to either, again, prepare themselves for licensing or to gather information from that family in order to progress them through your process. And it is completely dependent upon your process and where that family is in the process that you've established inside of SAM. Families can see dates, and these are really like checklist items that they need to complete. These are available for what you want to share with the family. Your team may have additional checklist items that are not shared with the family that allow your team to review and approve or make calls or take other actions that need to be done. All checklist items are date fields. Families can download items like a document that they need to complete. They can fill this document out and then come back to the checklist and actually upload the document here. When a document is uploaded, it appears here as a check mark showing that it's done, and it also applies the date that it's completed. Some checklist items, though, you may want families or end users to actually complete the form. So knowing the difference in SAM's terminology between a document and a form. A document is an uploadable document. Like, I hate dividing the word with the word, but we tend to use document and form interchangeably. But a document is, just like I showed you, sort of a PDF or other type of file that we want the end user to complete or read and sign. And then they will actually upload that. So a finished document is what gets uploaded. A form, on the other hand, is a form that's, here I go again, but it's a, I'm going to like air quote using the other term of document that we want the family or our client to actually complete for us. And these are all data points that are then available in your system. So a lot of agencies use forms to collect demographic information, who lives in the home, things that are generally requested on application form. They may also, and what's being used a lot is longer narrative and reports. So another example, let me see if I had pulled that up all the way. North Home site that Steve has set up, he's taking users to a family portal, but under his orientation and where he uses not this checklist, excuse me, the autobiography here. This is a really lengthy form for the family to complete, but he's opted to divide up this single form into multiple parts because it is such a lengthy form to be completed by the families, by parent one and parent two, or provider, and each form linked to a checklist item is just a part of that form so that the family can continue to come back here and enter just the specific part that they need. They can see clearly what's been completed versus what parts have not, and they can continue to get back to specific parts. So it's another way of displaying it. Let me see if I'd gotten up here. In Nightlight site, they have lots of programs all over the country. And so what I wanted to show with this checklist is how they're also using the checklist. So they've got forms set up for the family to actually go in and read the document. So it's all of the information that the family needs to read and understand in order to complete this document for the agency, and then they actually go in and sign. Okay, so they can sign this when they submit, then the checklist will be notified as completed. Okay, and so they've got all the different documents that they need to sign that can have electronic signatures. And then they also have documents, like interspersed documents that need to be downloaded and uploaded. It is totally fine. And I believe the way that this is being displayed here, there's not actually a spot to upload here. They are actually using the checklist item as an ordered way to provide information to the family. So I think that's really helpful. They also, because they have these programs that are very different and have different rules and regulations for whichever state they're in, because they work throughout the United States, the checklists have the ability to show up in if-then situations, meaning if it is a domestic in a particular state, these are the documents and the information that needs to be presented, versus this is an international adoption or a foster care service that's being carried out in a different state, and here's the regulations. So there's lots of information that can be displayed, and Sam knows, based on inputs onto the family record, which of these checklists to actually populate for the family. This is an interesting section because they're using it actually for education. So a video that needs to be provided, and then a form for completing that. Here's another document that needs to be downloaded, and then when it is signed and completed, they're providing information on the instructions to the end user for them to go in and upload. Okay, so this is a couple of the ways that checklists are actually being carried out today. Some of the things that you need to think about while you're in the setup process, which one of the first one I think is really the most important, is, will we need this item one time or many times? SAM is like a database, like every other database out there. It's based off tables and fields, and though the table structure and hierarchy are how the information relates to its to other pieces of information. So one of the top layers of the database, after, if we're looking at just the family record by itself, and that's what I'll speak to the most, is probably like family data being collected, is there's a layer called the case. And that's like, this family's come for international or domestic adoption, or they've come for foster to become licensed as a foster care provider. And that's, the case is sort of an umbrella that engulfs the entirety of their services that are completed by your agency. So it is a really important one, and a lot of times SAM defaults to that because it wants you to say this is a service that's being done, because a lot of checklist items are action items and tasks that need to be completed that carry forth and carry out that service. However, the services are so lengthy and complex that oftentimes there are other tables set up underneath the case or up underneath the family that allow more detailed information and this ability for your team to collect information multiple times. So what I mean by that is, I'll start with kind of high level of home study records. A lot of times home studies need to be updated and renewed after a year or other time period, dependent on the regulations. The license may need to be renewed at a different time than that home study. So having a separate table up underneath the case allows us to track the first time the original home study being completed, and then subsequent updates or renewals to the license or the home study. Another example would be people in the home. You might have one person, you might have no people in the home besides each provider or parent, but you also might have 5. You might have other children that are in the home. You might have grandparents or aunts and uncles, and For every person that lives in the home, you might need to collect a birth certificate, a social security card, and a driver's license if they're over a particular age. So having checklists set up off of a different table than the case will allow you to collect that information for person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, etc. Right? So you have this opportunity if it's up under a different table. Background checks are another example. Reports under a placement. Placements are an example. Reports that are based upon a particular placement of one child is another example of we're not going to use the case table to collect that information. We're going to use a deeper, more detailed table. We often call these types of tables multi-record tables in our guides because we're collecting that information multiple times or allowing the potential to collect it multiple times, be it for history or the fact that there are just multiple records, like many people in the home. Okay, so that is always a question that you need to sort of ask yourself is, does this actually belong on the case or does this belong on a different table? With checklists, you'll also want to determine, is it a document or a form? So I've just shown how a checklist displays it to end users between a document that is a electronic file that's uploaded into the system versus a form, which is data entry into your system. You also need to decide, are you actually going to store that in SAM? Just because you ask for something doesn't mean that you have to have families upload or enter that information in the database. It's just a decision that your team needs to make if your team feels comfortable. One of the benefits of adding it into the system is it's all stored securely in a single spot. And it's then accessible for you if you are out of the office, which most of us are at this point. But if you're out of the office or in a hospital setting or out in the field with a client or a family, right? You're able to pull that down. You'll also want to know who's responsible. And so the responsibility can fall onto a particular person or role within your organization. It could also be the responsibility of the family or the client or the new employee or the new volunteer that's going to be joining or the board member, right? So it's again, I will speak a lot to the family because I think you're going as a collective to get the most benefit by improving the recruitment and home study and licensing process as a primary objective for using SAM. But the checklist can be extended to other record types that you keep in your system, like those that I've mentioned, volunteers and people and community partners and things like that, of information that you need to definitely collect. Okay, so let me, since I'm already here, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this, and then I will go in and show a checklist item where we actually go and add it and hopefully have some time for questions. So I want you to make sure in preparation for checklists that you know your process, and figuring out process is just, it's not an easy task. A lot of us know this from oral, right? Oral information that's been presented to us by whoever was in that role before us, or some pieces of information that have been collected, or this is just how we do this. But being able to articulate it to our team and each other clearly, I think is super important. We have lots of resources on how to think about process, and we're also very happy to support you in developing your process if you need that support. I think it's really great to actually do this on paper first, and I say it on paper, but there's a couple ways to think about it. It's like paper, sticky notes, these things are easy to be changed and manipulated. And it sort of does a trick to our brain, which allows us this ability to consider change and reorganization of our process. However, when you're ready to actually go and set up that process in SAM, I would recommend doing it, having an electronic version of that, of your process, available so that you can do copy and pasting. Otherwise, you're sort of typing everything in again. And SAM does not have a built-in spell check. Browsers have it, but they've seen oftentimes where there's just spelling errors and things like that going on that having the ability to copy paste will make it efficient and also have a little bit more integrity with it. I would, for checklists that are going to have a lot of documents, pull that all together so that you can, again, be efficient when you're building the checklist in SAM. So any documents that are going to be needed for orientation or education or whatever, right? Whatever the checklist is that you're going to work on first, is going ahead and pulling those documents together so that the administrator who's putting those checklists together just has it at their fingertips and it can go through a bit faster. And the last thing that I'll say here is that it's really important for you to test, making sure that when you automate or have automations for those checklists, that you know how your users are going to trigger that checklist to populate. And you also want to see on the family side or the end user client side, what does it look like from them? And potentially have, a end user or a client that you can trust to give you some feedback. That's always super helpful to have that. All right, so let me see now. I'm going to make sure that I show building a checklist into SAM so that you can see that happening, and we can talk through some of the prompts. Okay, so checklists are found under settings. It's really going to be only full admins can see this. Under settings, there's a checklist configuration, and there is a checklist available for every main entity type that you have. You can see your main entity types appear. This is not necessarily your programs. It is like the higher level of big target groups of people that we're working with. Okay. Again, I'm going to focus on the family checklist. And what we're looking at here, when we get here, if you're starting this on day one at your organization and you've never used checklists, you will see nothing here. And so that can feel a little daunting at first of like, how do I get started? The first thing to do, again, is knowing your process. And then when you're ready to come in and add an item, that will initiate what we're starting to look at here. I like to see checklist sections sort of initially divided among your big stages that families go through, but then broken down a little bit more into manageable chunks for your team and for the end user. Okay, so for example, this is an inquiry section that it is triggered. SAM tells you when it's triggered right here on a specific data entry piece, which is like the inquiry receive date. It's important for you guys to know how and where that triggering date is entered by your team or by the end user. So in this case, I can make an assumption that this field is added to a public form, that when a family submits an inquiry online, the inquiry date or inquiry receive date rather is automatically entered on that form, and that will trigger this checklist section. We'll talk about triggering it in just a second. And then this, I've added this criteria, but there's an opportunity for you to pinpoint that this criteria for this entire section only applies when. And you can have many criteria. So it must be in Alabama and it must be for a case program of domestic case program. Yeah. Okay, so you can have multiple. Each checklist item, this is what I want to get to and make sure that you know and understand what the prompts are. I guess I didn't really plan for what I want it to say, so I'm going to start with something simple like test item, something like that, just because, with all going on, a sort of Creativity on the spot isn't going to work for me. So when you add a new checklist item, Sam at the very top is going to ask you, where do you want to put this item? So it can be in any of the checklist sections. And again, if you are brand new, you may not have any checklist sections. And I think when it's brand new, Sam is going to force you to enter a new custom section name, but this is how do you want to describe it? So I can choose from some that exists, or I can always add a brand new checklist section. Okay. And it can be labeled however you need. It just needs to make sense to you, right? And you're not only the full admin, but also your team and the other users who are going to be exposed and working from this. The next section in here is to select an existing field. So if I go back over, just want to make sure that we're all clear. Every checklist item here that's displayed is a date field. So we're displaying the date. It is a little bit more information than just a check mark. It is yes, it's done, and when it's done. So checklist items are always going to be date fields. I have two options here. I can either choose a field that exists in the system already, and I can select tables that are set that they can be used on checklists here, and I can choose one. Or I have the ability to actually create a brand new field. And if I were to create a brand new field, I still need to tell Sam what table does it belong on. And this is that question that I was asking a little bit ago of, is it done once or is it done many times? And that is going to help to define for you what table it's used on. We have guides. If that's a question, know that we're ready to help talk you through that. And we also have resources to support you on table selection. Okay. So again, what I want you to know, be aware of is that Sam defaults to the case because it's assuming this is more case related than it is based on that family. But the case may not be the proper table for you. Okay. If I'm creating a new field, I'm going to do new test field. I'm going to title that field. This can be the title of a document. It can be the title of a task that needs to be very clear to the user who's working from it. Okay. And just so you know, I'll grab, well, let me see. Let me just see really quick if this question in chat. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let's see. So, okay. Let's see. Does that make sense? Is that enough right there? I'll ask you guys in the question part when I unmute you all. Response time is, we have this ability to say, okay, I want to approve this document within 2 days from the time that document was received. Or I need to make a call to the family within 2 days after that inquiry is received. This is going to be highly fluid, right? As you're getting used to it, it's going to be based off of your agency's protocols and procedures and what's important to you. You can set the number of days. You can determine if it's business days or just calendar days, and then you can determine what when the response time is calculated from. So this is the selection of, this is, let's say, needed 3 days after the inquiry is received. The inquiry received date is entered, rather. Okay. So this field is going to have a due date. If today is the day, what's today? June 3rd. June 6th would be the due date to get completed, and Sam will be able to tell us the difference of that was done ahead of schedule or after the anticipated due date for it. Okay. You will set the responsible employee. You do not have to set this. It can just be there. And whoever is the case coordinator or whoever is working on this client record can go and be monitoring on a regular basis. If you need more specific action and notification to that person, you can set a very specific employee. Notice that Sam has a filter right here. It's super teeny tiny. I almost want to like scroll into it so we can actually read it. The user or the person record, so all of your users have person records. They must have a login enabled, otherwise it's sort of irrelevant. They wouldn't be able to see this anyway. Or their person type needs to be set as employee and staff. And honestly, that should probably be an and, because yeah, if you cannot access the database, you can't see this anyway. So it really doesn't even matter if you're an employee or staff, but it does help limit the list of people. And so these are all people in my system that have access to this particular database. Okay, so I can choose somebody's name and it's in there. And now every time that this checklist section is pushed out to a client record, it will have Anna's name on there, as she's responsible for completing this. You can also set it by the role. These are roles that you will add onto the client record. It could be added on the case, it could be added on the home study or subsequent tables. Case managers, adoption coordinators, people that are connected, home study workers, or the social worker that's writing that home study, okay? And then whether or not we're going to show that on the home page of the system, when that user logs in, are they going to see that list there? It doesn't have to be shown there. It could just be shown on the client record or from a report. Documents, then. The next thing that Sam is asking is this a document? Do you want Sam or that user to upload a document to the system? So again, just because a document's being collected does not mean that your team has to upload it into Sam. That is a choice and she'll make. You can select an existing document field, and Sam was limiting all of the document fields that exist, or you can create a new one. In the beginning, when you are initially setting these things up, when you create a new document, Sam's going to enter that document name that we've listed up here, and it'll put document upload here, so that we can distinguish it from the date field. And then you also will apply a document type. So either you've already set up these document type lists, or you can create a new document type. You will determine if this is going to be shown for the clients, and if so, there's more information that is displayed. So is there a document that you want the client to download in order to upload it to you, either instructional or otherwise, right? That's something that they need to sign. This will allow you to provide that to them. So if I go back over here, that is this document here. This is, okay, cool. Here is the income statement that we want you to complete, the template, okay, is what that is asking for. Or do we want the client to enter and submit a form online? And we can link them to a specific form, public form that we've built in SAM. Okay, let me jump back over here. That is this right here. I've seen agencies, some people have both a document and a form. SAM is not limiting you that way. And I think there's potential for it to be both. So it sort of is dependent on what it is that you're hoping to do. And then you can also provide instructions to your client for that specific document, detailing out, this is what we need you to do. So where is that? That is here. So on Nightlight's site, where they've provided this document to the family, this is what they want that client to do. They want you to upload the completed training checklist and the signature page. There might be additional documentation or pages in that download here, but they're looking for very specific components of that to be uploaded. Let's see. Criteria. Criteria is sort of this like Pandora's box that you can really, it can be anything that you've set up. So when you add, you're always going to select, well, where is this field coming from that we're relating values to? And I guess the thing that you'll need to know is ensuring that your records have that criteria entered prior to them being exposed to this checklist item. So the case program needs to be entered and known before the checklist is triggered, else it won't play well together, right? So making sure to know about that. The last thing that Sam is asking on here is for a memo. So, when we're building this, it makes total sense to us. And forever is the admin. However, if there is staff turnover or if there years go by and other things start happening, we start to forget exactly what that means. And it is, believe me, it happens all the time. We're like, we're working on a project and we're sort of like, do y'all know what this means? If we're coming from other databases too into SAM, oftentimes an agency doesn't really understand where and what that meant. This is a great opportunity for you to just sort of explain, we used it in this year, we're using it by this specific person, helping another user who knows nothing about your system to pick up quickly. That's what this is for. Okay. And then you press save. This checklist item will then be added to, I'm actually not going to save it. It's not a real great one. So I'm going to just go ahead and leave, but it gets added here under each checklist section and it'll be, displayed here just like this. You can use this to download the item. You can use this to go back and edit it. You can use this to get rid of this item from the configuration. There is absolutely a difference between the configuration screen. Most of SAM, well, all of SAM's setting screens have this gold highlight here. It's not super telling, but it is about the configuration versus on a family. And I want to really get to you guys and looking at your questions really quick. So I'm going to jump as quickly as I can over to that and make sure to do that and then open it up really for questions. On the checklist, on a client record, checklists are linked by default on the sidebar. And I actually almost with 100% certainty believe at this point you can't get rid of that. So it is always there and it is fairly near the top of the sidebar. These are the checklist sections that apply to this specific record, being this specific family. This is their checklist that's applied. Let's see. Okay. What I want to do, because we're well off and past the time, is I'm going to go through these questions really quick, and then I'm going to open it up for just us to have a discussion. So let me see. But I like that. Okay, has there ever been any considerations of allowing more than one checklist per entity? Okay, so right. Okay, so Steve asked, and I think he's dropped off, but he's asked when you're setting up a family checklist, or let's say you have many programs or you work in many states, is there a way to have completely separate checklists for the family? And unfortunately, no. Would it be helpful for an agency like Nightlight to have this? Absolutely. Let's see if I can jump in really quick to their configuration setting here for the family checklist. Just, it's actually sort of outrageous how long it is. There's a couple ways that you could reorganize it. They've got so many fields and they've utilized it so much that I'm just going to kind of point up this little bar right here. We don't even have to look at it, but realizing like there's so much for how many programs. A lot of agencies aren't really going to look like this, but it's a lot to look at. It actually takes a little bit of time to load. The way that this agency has decided to divide things is to put it all. They've got more like each section is divided into a process, and for every program and or country or state that it applies, they've got a criteria. So because Albania's information is going to be different than the Hong Kong or Nicaragua, they've got these criteria being added here. Another way to do it is to set up a different checklist section per country or per program. You can filter each item individually, but you can also filter the checklist section through this little guide here, or gear icon. And here you can add criteria. So when the case type equals home study only, or but it doesn't equal this and it does equal this, this is going to be highly dependent on what works for you. I sort of would be more under the recommendation of adding separate checklist sections. Nightlight is sort of an extreme example because they have so many programs in so many countries and so many states that when they decided to go through a big cleanup project, they felt like this was the way for them to go. And it's completely, it's just going to vary for your agency. Let me see. Let me go over here, go to my chat. So we're asked, like, how do you set the responsibility for the family? That is on that checklist section when we are allowing that family to see the checklist item. I would say that that's really where you're setting the responsibility, is that honestly, the responsibility could be for the case coordinator, and it's shown to the clients, and that being shown to the clients allows that checklist item to show up on the public checklist. I do need to show you where you access that public checklist, so I'll get to that in just a second. But that's when it is marked as shown to clients. I would say that's how it sets the responsibility for them, and that's what allows it to be shown here. So let me go back really quick one step. On this view of the configuration, it'll notate when it's shown to the client. So for example, application approved date is not presented to the clients. It is presented, and all of these items are presented to the team internally. But this one checklist item is not shown to the clients. And so I would say it is not of their responsibility. This is where, honestly, it would be like the caseworker, whoever is the supervisor that's going to complete that item. Okay. And that's what I would say the difference is. When I go in and edit an item or add an item, two ways to set responsibility is a responsible employee or whether we're going to show it to the clients. Okay. And on a family record, so this is this family's checklist. When we have a checklist section that is completed, there is this little eyeball icon, and this, even though these checklist items are shown to the client, once they're done, we can actually limit the client from seeing it so that they cannot change any data that they've submitted. But it also helps to kind of pull up what's left. Excuse me, like what's now the next thing for them to do so they can be pointed and focused with their work. Now that I've not shown this over here, that is this section. If I refresh the screen, we'll see that section is going to disappear from my visibility as the client record, as the client, because I'm logged in as the family record. Let me see. I think there's one more question. How do you create the colored strips or headers in between sections on the checklist? Okay, so I think what Jen is asking here is about these headings right here. This is sort of like how Sam sets this up by default. Each of these are the different checklist sections that we're showing here. So it is all of these sections have their own, and it's going to depend, let me see right here, if it is a multi-record section like persons in home and some of the documents that I need. I was doing some testing on here and I forgot to clean it up for you because so there's a whole bunch of people on here. But this is a person in home record. I've changed the terminology for the family. So the family is seeing something that's more reasonable for them to see. And it displays who that's for, what's the person record that it's for. And here are the documents that I want to be uploaded for Nana Creek, versus here are the documents that I want to be uploaded for Stephanie Test or Stephanie Test 2, right? On and on. These sections, when it's a multi-record, are going to come up as many times as are triggered for that record. So this is, I've got 10 people in home or something at this point for this client record. It's one for each of those people, and that's how they show up. Okay. Okay. And so right now what I'm going to do is unmute everybody so that you can talk to me, and participants, and then allow you to ask questions. I think everybody's unmuted. If you want, you can click the little, you may need to unmute yourself individually through Zoom to actually communicate. Are there any questions about building or interacting with the checklist at all? Is anyone in process? I mean, that's almost like a silly question because most people are, and I know that because of support requests and calls that I'm on and what people are working on. Most people seem to be.
So I have two questions. One is just a clarifying question. So the strips, the header strips, they are all for each of the different checklists.
They are for the different checklist sections. Yeah. So let me jump back over. I think this might be a better view. It is like this section right here. Yep.
I have another question. Right at the top, you have these wonderful headers. In fact, one of the other companies has this beautiful picture. So presumably you can put anything in your header. Is it possible to have a checkoff list in the header that only the staff person can check off on, not the client, the staff person? For example, say you were giving a very brief overview, they had 6 portions to do down below, and you say number 1, number 2, and so on. And when they've completed number 1, you just check it, and then you eliminate it from their view lower down. But they can still see in the header, oh, I've done that one, I don't have to worry about it.
Do you mean like having on this form being like the family checklist, like some information that tells the internal user, your team member, how many sections and what's expected in each section?
Well, the internal people will see it, but I would like to do it for the client. When the client goes in, we have some directions for them up top.
Uh-huh.
We'd like to include on one of our programs a small mini list like inquiry, application, flood test, whatever they need to get done. Have a little box next to it, like those lovely little boxes that you have as a checklist box. You know what I mean? When you're putting an item in to fill out. But only us as the employees are able to check that. So when the client goes in, they see the list of 6 and they see the first 3 having already been done. We don't want the client to check them. We want to. And it's just for physical purposes.
Right, gotcha. No, that is not available. It's a great idea though. So I will add that as a story. So, and I think let me make sure that I'm clear. It's sort of like at the top of this checklist section, you would like to say, hey, there are X number of checklist items in here, where it's really just showing home study agreements kind of up at the top with a check mark. And when your team says, yep, all of these are done, you're sort of signing off that that section is done, and then it's displayed to the client. Yep. Right. No, that totally makes sense. It doesn't work that way right now. No, yeah. The only thing that you're able to do is really just hide it from their visibility, right? So, so you can hide it for the client here, and internally knowing, okay, everything in this application section is wrapped and done, you could hide this section so that even your team administratively, when they're coming in and accessing this checklist, can see, okay, now we're on team administration and potentially make the assumption that this is done, but they could open it back up to verify, yes, all the dates are there. That, mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And now that that you've mentioned it, I'm gonna start thinking about what would that look like. I would love it if you, well, I mean, we've got this all recorded and stuff too, but if you wanted to come to the call next week and mention it, if you have, certainly like sharing your ideas, that's the point of those calls. It's great. So what I'll do is set up a story for that, for our development team to consider for upcoming releases for sure. Because yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because it's such a complicated process. No update on that yet. It just hasn't made the major priorities for everything, but it's still there. Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else? Nightlights, I mean, we looked at their checklist and they've got many admins on building checklists and utilizing it. And Jen, maybe would you let us know how are your clients interacting with checklists? Oh, cool. And how does your team, I mean, like, has it saved your team time? Do you find other benefits other than that? Good. Yep. Yep. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. And that would come into play. Like, again, it's sort of a choice of how you decide you want to set it up. If it's all in one checklist section, each checklist item that only applies to provider one or provider two, you'll say, like, add a criteria that applicant one or parent one name is not empty. Then it applies. Or parent two name, then it applies. Or mother or father, or however you guys decide to distinguish parent one versus parent two. Does that make sense to you, Jen? That mm, Right.
Yeah.
And
So we wanted to do the legwork before you got going on that. So it's all prepared and ready to go.
gotcha. Gotcha. Yep. No, that's a great idea. Thank you for going ahead and working ahead rather than waiting on us. And what Jen is talking about for everybody on the call is that a family record in SAM, be it a foster family record or an adopted family record, is looked at as like a single unit. And right now, today, there's only one login. So both providers can use the exact same email address and login to access when some of the documentation is actually just for one provider one or provider two. And so there's not separate logins so that we know, oh yeah, this is the parent one's login versus this is the parent two login and who's the person that's actually completing the form. And so it's an awesome story. Jen is a super user and definitely comes up with tons of ideas because she's using the system so often. So that is something that is in our development queue to be looked at in an upcoming version. Yep. Jana Lynn just asked if we will be sending out the link to everyone. We absolutely will. It'll be available. Let me actually show you this. We've recently moved our webinars all into a single spot. So it's right here when you click support, or I'm sorry, excuse me, not support, the help button. It will take you to this page here. And all of our webinars have been moved here rather than on our website. They're all available here. And so once I complete this and get it uploaded and get it fiddled out, it'll be here. What? Oh, there it is. So is that it? Well, what's maybe Jess, you want to help me?
Just click that password. There you go.
Okay.
I'll rename the category so
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So we'll probably make some changes here so that the videos are all here and are a little, you don't have to do quite so many clicks, but we'll be organizing them to make them relevant on specific topics. And then you can go and watch them. They would say they're 30, 45 minutes each. If that's a little too long, I mean, certainly you can scroll and move of what you do and don't want to see. There are also loads of videos kind of posted out and through here too that you can access. But for checklists, for family portal, for those kinds of things, that's primarily where our focus is making sure that everybody's taking the most advantage of SAM through those tools. So we'll be continuing to provide information on those. But again, it's kind of scattered out and throughout here. And so a couple of things then as we'll move towards closing. Unless, let me just pause for a second. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Okay. I will, let's see. Let me drop this down so I can think here. So we're starting to have, or introduce this month, community calls, which will be really a very open-ended forum for us to come together, talk about, just very open. It could be listening, but hopefully you will join the conversation about what you're working on, what questions you have. We'll jump into people's sites, look at examples, try and help you through setup and just share best practices that you're using together. The first one is next week, same time at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can find it on our webpage, InReachSolutions.com/events. All of those are here and you're welcome to go in and register for that. So our next one's here and there will be others. We'll talk about then in July, introduction again to the family portal and what's different about that. Checklist, in my opinion, are sort of part of that family portal. So you're not in vain if you start with checklists and then, oh my gosh, I've got to do the family portal. It's a portion of it. And so, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that today. There's a lot going on out there, so be safe. Take care. Hope your voices are heard and your finding comfort however you can right now, taking advantage possibly of the summer weather. And if you have questions, always feel free to reach out to us at support@inreachsolutions.com or by clicking the support link at the top of your SAM system. And I'll leave you at that. Have a wonderful day. All right, I'm going to close. Thanks, you guys. Bye, Stacy. And thanks you, everybody, for joining. You're welcome. Bye, guys.